hall was quiet in the particular way that only powerful places ever managed, the kind of quiet that hummed faintly and made your teeth feel like they were listening. I stood where I had been told to stand, which was never quite where I wanted to be, surrounded by beings who looked almost human if you didn't stare too long at the wrong details. The translation lattice ticked softly behind my eyes, feeding me meanings before I had time to regret understanding them. Somewhere above, the ceiling adjusted itself, as if the room had just remembered it needed to breathe. I tried not to fidget. The floor didn't appreciate that. It responded to movement with subtle corrections, nudging my balance until I felt like I was standing on a polite but judgmental animal. Across the chamber, the queen rested one hand on the arm of her throne, fingers long and still, her long ears angling slightly as though they had their own opinions about the gathering. She smiled once, briefly, at something an advisor whispered, and the smile carried enough authority to end 3 arguments I hadn't even heard yet. This was supposed to be ceremonial, safe. I had been told that word several times, always with the same tone people used when assuring you that a device was mostly stable. I was here as a liaison, which in practice meant nodding at things I didn't fully understand and trying not to offend anyone whose lifespan could be measured in geological eras. My uniform felt too tight, or maybe the gravity did that on purpose. A noble to my left glanced at me, eyes reflecting data streams I couldn't see. "You appear tense," she said pleasantly. "First royal gathering off my home planet," I replied. "I'm trying to look relaxed. If I fail, please assume it's a cultural expression." She blinked, then laughed, a sound like glass chimes colliding. "Noted." The murmur of the hall shifted. The queen rose. Every system in the room recalibrated itself around that movement, lights dimming by a fraction, sound folding inward. She did not raise her voice when she spoke, and yet it arrived everywhere at once. "We have gathered to confirm continuities," she said, and the word carried layers the translators struggled to unpack. Treaties, bloodlines, equations older than my species. She let her gaze travel, unhurried, until it reached me. It lingered just long enough to make my internal organs submit a formal complaint. I smiled, because that had saved me in worse situations, like the time I accidentally insulted a planetary governor by complimenting his offspring's tentacle symmetry. The queen's lips curved faintly. For a moment, the tension eased, like a held breath released. Advisors shifted. Someone activated a projection that immediately shut itself off again, embarrassed. Then the queen leaned forward, as if sharing a secret meant only for the throne and the air between us. "The child," she murmured, and the word rippled outward despite her softness, "will not remain hidden any longer." The translation lattice hesitated. I felt it, a tiny stutter in my thoughts, like a missed step on a staircase. Around me, the silence sharpened. She continued Unhurried, truth resists compression. Especially this one. Every gaze in the hall pivoted. It was impressively synchronized, like a well-rehearsed assassination attempt, except the target was me. I looked behind myself, just in case there was another human I hadn't noticed. There was. I raised a hand slowly. I feel like I should ask a clarifying question, I said. Possibly several. Ideally in private. Preferably on another planet. A few nobles snorted, despite themselves. The Queen's ears angled back slightly, which my briefing materials suggested meant amusement or preparation to destroy a civilization. Sometimes both. You may ask, she said. Great, I said, heart pounding hard enough to qualify as a distress signal. Because I don't recall having a child. Not biologically, legally, metaphorically, or as part of a forgotten prophecy. A ripple of laughter escaped one side of the hall, quickly smothered. The Queen's gaze never left mine. Memory, she said gently, is not the only record that matters. That was when I realized two things at once. First, that this gathering was no longer ceremonial in any sense I understood. Second, that whatever joke the universe was playing on me had just reached the part where it waited to see if I would laugh or break. No one spoke for several breaths, and then several more, as if the room itself were waiting to see who would blink first. I considered blinking theatrically, decided against it, and instead focused on not collapsing in a way that would later be described as historically undignified. The silence finally cracked when an advisor cleared their throat with mechanical assistance. The sound slightly amplified, like even their lungs needed permission to interrupt. Your Majesty, someone said carefully, the Continuity Council was not informed this disclosure would occur today. The Queen tilted her head, long ears shifting with the motion. That, she replied mildly, is because the Continuity Council would have attempted to prevent it. They are very fond of delaying truths until they fossilize. A few nervous chuckles slipped out before anyone could stop them. I appreciated those people. They felt like allies, even if they might vote for my execution later. I tried again, just to keep myself oriented, I said. Are we talking about a literal child? Or is this one of those situations where child means a sentient star, a rebellion, or an equation that eats planets? Literal, the Queen said. Well, I said, exhaling. That narrows it down in the worst possible way. A new projection bloomed into existence between us, activated by someone whose job title probably translated to keeper of alarming visual aids. Streams of symbols coiled and unfolded genetic matrices, dancing with probabilities and warnings. The translators struggled again, this time feeding me concepts rather than words, compatibility anomalies, cross-species resonance, an experiment officially canceled but unofficially completed. I recognized my own species, biomarkers embedded in alien structures like fingerprints left at a crime scene. I didn't remember visiting. That's not possible, I said automatically, which was what people always said right before learning that it very much was. It was improbable, the Queen corrected. We are very good at improbable. Her tone remained light, almost conversational, and that somehow made everything worse. Advisors argued in tight, rapid bursts, their words overlapping in my head like badly tuned radio channels. Politics surfaced quickly, because politics always did. Accusations of broken treaties, questions of legitimacy, suggestions that involved words like containment and reassignment, which I had learned were never comforting. I leaned slightly toward the Queen. For what it's worth, I muttered, if I did unknowingly help create a politically destabilizing miracle, I apologize. I usually try to do that on purpose. Her mouth curved. Your species has a talent for chaos, without intent. I've been told. The council chamber doors sealed themselves, responding to a spike in collective stress. Someone tried to override them and failed. Another laugh escaped the room, thin and hysterical this time. The Queen raised one hand, and the systems obeyed her instead. The arguing softened, then stilled. The child exists, she said. The child is alive, and the child is not a weapon, a bargaining tool, or a mistake to be erased. That last part, I said, feels like it should be underlined. Her gaze met mine again, steady and unreadable. That last part, she agreed, is why you are still standing freely. That did not reassure me as much as she probably intended. A senior noble stepped forward, eyes sharp. The human's involvement alone invites instability. Public knowledge has already begun spreading, the Queen interrupted. Secrets decay faster than matter. I rubbed my face. I hate to interrupt destiny, I said, but could someone please explain when I was supposed to have been involved? I'd like to remember it retroactively, if possible. The Queen's expression softened, just a fraction. You were chosen, she said, not by decree, by resonance. Of course I was, I said. I can't even choose a meal without unintended consequences. Despite everything, laughter rippled again, reluctant, but real. The tension didn't vanish, but it bent, just enough to keep the room from snapping in half. I stood there, at the center of an empire's uncomfortable truth, realizing that whatever came next would rewrite more than laws. And somehow, absurdly, I found myself hoping the child inherited my sense of humor. If they were going to survive this galaxy, they would need it. The argument did not end so much as it exhausted itself. Voices thinned, objections repeated themselves, and even outrage seemed to run out of energy when it realized it was getting nowhere. I stayed where I was, mostly because every time I shifted my weight a sensor, somewhere reacted like I had threatened the fabric of reality. Eventually, the Queen spoke again, and the room remembered who it belonged to. This gathering was never meant to decide the child's fate, she said. It was meant to reveal it. A counselor tried one last time, and the human, I raised a finger, Still here, still confused, slightly hungry. The queen regarded me with something warmer than amusement now. The human is no longer incidental, she said, nor replaceable. That word landed heavily. Replaceable had been my default state in most organizations I'd worked for. Useful, sure, essential, rarely. I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest, uncomfortable, but not unpleasant. The projections shifted, resolving into fewer symbols, clearer truths. The child was real, protected, legally recognized, under ancient clauses. No one liked to dust off, because they complicated power structures. The forbidden experiment was reframed as a convergence event, which was apparently the polite way of saying destiny had cheated. Factions recalculated. Threats were withdrawn not out of kindness, but because the math no longer favored them. So, I said slowly, no executions. A few nobles looked disappointed. The queen shook her head. No executions. Good, I said. I've already had a long day. The doors unsealed. Messages flooded in from across the system, some angry, some hopeful, some trying very hard to sell commemorative merchandise. The truth had escaped containment, just as the queen predicted. And instead of tearing the empire apart, it did something far more dangerous. It forced change. Later, though time had become a flexible concept, I stood beside the queen at a quieter threshold of the palace. The child slept somewhere beyond walls and laws, unaware of how close they had come to becoming an abstract problem instead of a person. You could have let me leave, I said. Claimed I was irrelevant. Yes, she replied, and history would have repeated itself. I glanced at her long ears, the faint movements that betrayed thoughts she never rushed. I don't know how to be what this situation needs, I admitted. I make jokes when I panic. I ask bad questions. She smiled. You stay, she said. You listen. You refuse to disappear. That is sufficient.